Queen's University and Ulster University. You're all very welcome this morning to our Good Relations Week event as we consider, can we cultivate good relations between communities of all sorts through social and community farming? You might be wondering what a social policy hub is doing running an event on social and community farming. So I just want to explain the case, or why that is the case, with a brief potted history of this place. And I want to begin by bringing us back to the year 795. And in 795, the Annals of Ulster recorded the burning of Rathlin by the heathen. This was the first historical record of the Vikings turning up in this part of the world. The Vikings came for many reasons, but one stands out: land. In 1169, the Normans, who were also Vikings via France, showed up in this island. They also came for many reasons, but one stands out: land. In the 16th and 17th centuries, the plantation of Ireland happened, along with it the extermination of most of the wolves on the island too. The plantation occurred for many reasons, but one stands out: land. In the 18th and 19th centuries, millions of people left these shores for a new life in a new world. They left for many reasons, but one stands out. You've guessed it: land. You see, when we include the land in our understanding of good relations, we not only understand our history better, but we heal from our history better. And that is what we really want to consider today as we build a new Northern Ireland. Can we, by including the land through the process of social and community farming, build better relations with each other, with communities of all sorts, old and new alike? We've got three fantastic speakers lined up today to tell us about the breadth of approaches that are social and community farming. And then at the end, we'll be sitting up here. There'll be a time for some questions. So if you can please hold your questions to the end. Also, just to let you know that this today is being filmed, but the camera's just on the speakers at the front. But we will turn off the recording when it comes to the Q&A at the end. So I'm delighted to welcome our first speaker, who is Dr. Matt Williams from Jubilee Farm, which is Northern Ireland's first community-owned farm. Matt is a founding trustee, but now also the Conservation and Education Manager. We had also hoped to have William Martin with us today, who's a long-standing volunteer at Jubilee Farm, originally from a farmer actually in the Ivory Coast, who has helped to build Jubilee Farm from the grounds up. Unfortunately, due to a last-minute medical appointment, he wasn't able to join us, but he's actually co-written an article with us, so Matt is going to be speaking on his behalf, as well as about the work that Jubilee Farm has and is doing on community farming. Later on, we'll hear a little bit more about scaling this approach up in Northern Ireland from our other two speakers, but Matt is going to start us off by showing us what this looks like on the ground. So, Matt, over to you.
Morning, everyone. If I stray away from the mic, which I sometimes tend to do, just point me back to it, okay? I have a tendency to kind of drift around when I speak. So yeah, this is Jubilee Farm, and it's been going as an organization since 2017, really. But in our current iteration as Jubilee Farm at what is now called Jubilee Farm, it's been the beginning of 2019. And the way it started off, as with so many of these things, it was just an idea. And it was an idea that grew to a set of relationships with other people who cared about this idea. And in particular involved people from across the community. And in this context, in Northern Ireland, it's Christians from the Protestant side and the Catholic side. To the extent that actually in the early days, some of our steering group members and board members were nuns, others were from Protestant churches. And what drew us together was this sense that caring for creation is important. And the idea of Jubilee Farm has always been to actually care for creation in a way which is producing food and a way which is actually looking after habitats for all the other creatures in the local ecosystem. In a way which we've not labeled ourselves as one particular style of farming. We've got organic principles, regenerative principles, Proper agroecological is the best description for what we're ultimately trying to do. And for most of us involved not being farmers by trade, by training, or in some cases by talent, my own, we're learning as we go. It's very much trial and error, and more error, and a few more errors, and then the odd success. And so in this whole process, since 2019 until now, what we try to do is remain rooted in the core purpose of what we're up to, which is not actually to develop technical innovation in one of these micro areas around farming, but it is to develop a relational understanding of how people connected to the land and connected to each other. And this is really what creation care is about. Ultimately, it's a theological thing, which I can say more about later if you like. But essentially, the environmental and agricultural work we do is shaped by basic principles of unity, flourishing, understanding, and love, and a kind of macro principle of Christ-centeredness, which brings those things together. And who we work with is primarily not Christians, actually. As it's developed over the years, we always set out to work for the benefit of the geographical community and community of interest, and as a community benefit society, that's part of our identity. Most of the people who come are not from a particular community. In fact, it's a really interesting thing, especially in relation to what we're doing today, to note that the majority of people involved over the years tend to come from elsewhere, including myself. Kind of a bunch of misfits in different way. People who are not as rooted in local community as maybe some others who live nearby. And that's a really interesting thing to observe. It wasn't the original intention, but that's an interesting thing to observe. And I'll say something about why that might be the case a bit later on. So what do we do specifically? Four main things, really. Community-supported agriculture, which I'm sure most of you guys know very well what this is about, but essentially it's a way of producing food that involves a community at the production and selling level. So it's not a production which is disconnected from the community around it. And we've produced a variety of things, horticulture and livestock. We do conservation work, and we do care farming, or social farming as it's sometimes known. And we have education and public engagement around all of these things, and that's a particular work that I'm responsible for. We tend to get volunteers coming along to be involved in any one of these areas, really. But what's happened quite a lot is that people who initially came along as care farmers or social farmers end up being involved longer term. They become part of the community, become long-term volunteers, and William comes into that category. Now, it is frustrating that we couldn't have William here. He can tell his story much better than I can. But I'll try to share some of the things that he and I talked about, because we chatted through today a few times, and I got a pretty good idea of the kinds of things that I think he would want to express as we talked. So William, pictured there crouching down, is part of the Crew people, which is not one of the bigger tribal groups in Cote d'Ivoire. I shouldn't have tried to say that in French. Ivory Coast. Not one of the bigger ones. Tend to be mainly concentrated around the west and the south of the country. So in places like Aoibeann, of course, which is it's an incredible picture. This would be on the outskirts of Aoibeann. And despite what this looks like and the concentration of houses, farming is still a daily part of life for most people. And as well as the cash crops which would be grown, you get coffee, cacao, palm tree, rubber. A lot of people would just grow for food. So you grow your yams, your plantain, taro, just kind of a root vegetable, or rice. So he's used to being in this kind of context where there's farming around, although he wouldn't have considered himself really as a farmer. And he'd been involved with us since 2019, when he got connected through the International Meeting Point, just down the Lisbon Road, not far away. And since then, he's done all kinds of things. He would say pretty much everything that is to be done at Jubilee Farm, he's had to go at some point. Planting, weeding, feeding moving animals, conservation, helping to build steps down the river, helping me just the other week trying to drag a goat down the hill so we could let the goat help us clear the steps. it really didn't work. And in fact, Martin sort of warned me that the goat wasn't happy to be moved from his friends, and I thought we'd try it. And it turns out Martin was really right. We shouldn't have tried it. So he's really benefited us by being involved, but he would also say he's benefited a lot as well. It's been a big deal for him to develop his skills in English, and obviously the particular East Antrim or Belfast dialect doesn't always help new learners of English, and so it's helped him to be amongst those people, plus people like me with more kind of mongrel hybrid accents, but also just keeping him physically strong. He's moved pig arcs like that. You can only see his legs in this picture. Moving pig arcs around, you have to do that fairly frequently if you're not going to let your lamb get too teared up. He's learnt new skills, he's learnt animal behaviour. He knew before it happened, actually, that unfortunately we were going to lose a number of our piglets, and he said, this doesn't look good, and he explained what it was about the sow that wasn't looking healthy, and he was right. And that's not formal training, that's just his experience of relating to these animals over time, which I find that a really cool aspect of the way people relate to the farm. He would say it's not always been easy to volunteer, partly logistically. It's really not helped by the lack of train station now close to where he lives, because we've got one close to us up in Glyn, but there's not one corresponding close to him in Belfast anymore. He's had some health challenges, I mentioned, and it helps him to be out doing stuff outside, but also sometimes it's been impossible if the health challenges have been too severe. So the range of things that he's kind of had to deal with has sometimes made it difficult to keep volunteering. But it's benefited him really deeply. And I want to reflect on some of the things which I think contribute to why it's benefited him so much, and how it's benefited others, and particularly if we're here today to talk about why it actually contributes to good relations. If you want a picture that kind of illustrates quite a lot about good relations, this is a good one. It's one of our other volunteers who's particularly friendly with the former mayor. I actually don't know who the mayor is, I should be more politically aware. But there's a whole pile of things which happen when people are made to connect with people and land. And one of them is actually just at a civic level, that relationships are formed. But on the official level as well, we see people through a really very difficult, sometimes quite traumatic process of the status change from being asylum seekers or refugees to working through this. Now, I'm not saying anything specific about William or Sonny in this regard, but all the people who come from overseas or come with a certain status are in the midst of some kind of process. And my wife included in this, my wife's from Canada, in the midst of a process which is often a pretty demanding one. And you see people move through it, and they move through it together as part of community, as part of a community of friends. And then you get this integration happening, which is an integration socially, yes, but also politically, especially when settled status comes, and economically, when people begin to get jobs, often using the skills that they've developed at the farm. And I can see this firsthand because some of my neighbours in Whitehead actually used to volunteer at the farm. Now they're employed, or the guy is employed in the town. We had his 4 girls round just the other day, and there's a kind of integration into society which has happened through being involved in the farm, and now it's enabled a kind of really deep, deep connection to be made with the local community. We had 4 young Syrian girls chasing my 2-year-old around the house. I found that a really beautiful picture of sometimes what this looks like on the ground, you know. And the biggest testimony, I think, to the impact of this on people is when they say things like, "I've found home here." That really gets me. When people say, like, "I found home," there's something really deep to enable you to say that must have happened. And, you know, this is part of the tragedy with the protests and the riots and the anti-immigration feeling we've had recently. Because guys who've been around for years and years suddenly feel alienated in the place they thought of as home. And, we've heard stories of this where people are getting told to leave the park bench they've sat on for 8 years. And even by kids, kids who don't know better, they've been told that by their parents. They've been told that that's actually the right thing to do, even, to ask someone to move on. And I've heard from our volunteers being spoken to in that way. And so I think this idea of home is really important. It's what's being contested, it's what's at stake. And it's actually what's cultivated at community farms. And I've thought a lot about this in terms of how to define it, and I'm still working at it. Being an academic, I could probably spend the rest of my life trying to define it and redefine it and research it. But I think home is about relationships with people and place. It's not just about relationships with people. I really think it's about relationship with place. And by place, I mean land, plant life, and animals. I think that's really important. And, you can see some of these connections developing, but you can't actually make that sense happen. There's kind of something extra that happens after someone's come along, volunteered, got involved. There's something extra that happens, and then there's a click, and they're like, I feel home here. And it's because I think that unique combination of relationships, which you can cultivate in different ways, but when you're actually at the community farm, and when your relationship to the land is one of mutual care and actually need, when you realize you need the land as well, there's a reciprocity there which I think establishes something quite unique in our connection to it. And again, that sense of home comes. William understands animals far better than I do. But that's been a really important part of why he's felt home in Jubilee Farm. Sonny, who's in this picture, also seems to be an expert on goat behavior now. He'll quite often tell me what he thinks goats need and why, or what they're likely to do if I try to do fencing in a certain way. And I think what's happening here is both with the animals and with the plant life, with the cultivation and horticulture, is that a site of division, which is the land, and like Jonny talked about, all through history, it's been something that's driven people to move, but of course driven people to fight. It's not just that people migrated into a land and just said, oh, this is a place we can cultivate it. It was always contested, had to be fought for, and people killed for it and continue to kill for land. A site of division can actually be a site of healing. When people work together on land, there's actually something established which is established in a way which I think can only really be established through working on land together. And that's a beautiful thing to witness and be part of it. I also think that agriculture has become alienated from mainstream society. So the Europe-wide farmers' protests, which seem to have drifted into distant memory a little bit because we've had the European elections since then, but I think we shouldn't forget how impactful they were and still are, and how they revealed a deep rift between mainstream society and farmers. And that tells us something about our relationship to the land, I think. And a part of the point of doing community farming is actually to reconnect not only to the land in a general conservational sense, but actually to the whole agricultural community, which has always been and always will be essential to our survival as people. I'm actually doing a project on farm-based education at the moment, and I'll somehow share a link with anyone who wants it after this. But one of the things we found when we talked to people who are involved in farm-based education, and this is across all the sectors, whether it's formal, informal, from early childhood right up to adult level, is that there's things they know and understand only through being in that context with each other. It's like it becomes a lens through which you see everything else, and a lens through which you relate to people as well. And there are things which you only do when you're part of a community farm. Helping someone balance on the broad fork is not something you're generally going to do in life. You're not going to help a 21-year-old woman from Larne that you never would have met in any other context balance on the broad fork and work out how to make the land suitable for what you want to plant in it, unless you're involved in a community farm. Yet doing those things gives this basis for establishing a relationship, which again, I think it is unique and lets people know what home is. So William did have a word for policymakers. As I was asking him, and if there are policymakers in the room, I'd love for you to hear this particularly. As I was asking him what he would want to say to policymakers, he said two things. He said one is that community farming actually helps and encourages people to become farmers, despite not having a real background in farming. It actually helps people to become farmers. And I love that because I think increasingly, and especially with my theological background, we're kind of made to be farmers on some level. And I'm aspiring to that myself, despite being practically nearly useless, as my great auntie would have said. The second thing William said, was that social farming, it allows different volunteer farmers just to be together. Simply being together, it's a context in which you can actually be together. There are fewer and fewer social contexts where just being together, doing things, is actually practical and possible and desirable. And sharing experiences of how farming works, and sharing experience of how to do things on a land, doing things that benefit everyone, and not just the human, but the non-human population in the local ecosystem, really establishes a unique basis for a relationship. And he says we need more community farmers, we need more funding for community farmers, and we need more recognition of the importance this plays for good relations. Because it's not just a niche approach. That's what I want to leave you with in terms of a thought. This is not a niche approach to good relations, but I think it really strikes at the heart of what makes us human. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Matt, for grounding us at the beginning of today with what community farming looks like in practice, the benefits and the opportunities, but also the challenges and the threats as well. But what we want to do now is think about how we can scale this up from the first community-owned farm in Northern Ireland to many community farms. To do that, we have Tiziana O'Hara from Cooperative Alternatives, who led a really inspiring project that kind of spun off Jubilee Farm called Cultivating Community Farming, which finished in March, but is still going on. In fact, we're working on scoping a follow-on project. I'm sure she'll tell us a little bit about that. So, Tiziana, over to you to tell us about Cultivating Community Farming.
Thank you very much. My name is Tiziana O'Hara. I work for an organization called Cooperative Alternatives. And this project was a partnership project with the Jubilee Farm and Jonny. And we started 2 years ago, practically, and inspired by what Jubilee had achieved. So the real question we try to answer is say, well, why we don't have more of these projects in Northern Ireland? And here is what we went out to look for. We got £100,000 of money to help us develop other projects across the region. And our funders was the Cope Foundation. We asked and we really got the time to develop this project over 2 years. That's time is an important part of this project. We recruited 10 groups across the region, and we will, I have the next slide to tell you where the groups are, but I'm very happy to also direct to some of the people in the room. There are the groups. So if you have even more questions after this talk, do approach them, Malini. And we have a Lauren Bank as well, farm there. So anyway, this project really was about accelerating the journey of becoming a community farm, basing our knowledge on what we learned with Jubilee, and then move on in the direction that each of the single groups wanted to develop their community farm. So we were not imposing anything. We were just there to assist a development process. We offer 40 plus days of expert support, and by expert support, I would say specialist support, like governance or legal entities or financials, how a profit and loss look like. Because a community farm is at the intersection of three aspects of an enterprise. The enterprise aspect, the land, and the community. And you need to really develop these three aspects in order to have a community farm. And we had different workshops, skill share, a lot of exchanges among these beautiful groups. And the groups were here. As you can see, it's a nice spread across the region, from the west to the east, from the north to the west. You can actually read the case study in this report because we have published this report. And there were a variety of groups. I mean, Gorchin were interested in creating an agroforestry project. So they took part of the land and they were kind of cultivating their forest and their community engagement around the forest. Glenside Farm was a different project altogether. They already had the land. They wanted to expand some of their services for the community and become a place of respite for some of the people that they had identified as within their own geography needed to come to a farm and be involved in activities that could help them to cope with life. Lorenbank, another interesting project, already very much into horticulture, but they made the journey from being a private enterprise into a community interest company, opening up their own kind of productions and also use of the land to communities around them. So each project was left to their own device in the direction they wanted to develop, but we were there to support them with the journey. And also track their impact, because one of the things that we always had difficulty in explaining the benefits of community farming was when you go to a funder, when you go to government, is, show us the numbers. So our small attempt in this project was about collecting some numbers. This is one of our photographs anyway. It's about people, really. It's about building those relationships among people. And I really find that was the most rewarding part. But again, the funders were asking numbers. So over 2 years, we had overall over the 9 projects that we helped to develop their community farm. We had 1,587 individuals engaged with and interacted across the groups, 650 volunteering opportunity created, and 15,000 volunteer hours dedicated. So that is a part of the first element of community farm, the community part. And those numbers give you the real impact that only 2 years of work, only 2 years, guys, have brought to the areas where they were. We also had to measure the land kind of impacts, and here we had, over the course of 2 years, we had 37 acres of land made accessible across Northern Ireland for communities. We have 17.2 acres, actually, of land given to conservation, and 7.4 acres of land given to food production. Remember, these were startup projects, so this reflect exactly what a startup project will look like, because the first thing that you build is your engagement with your people, and then you build your enterprises. So it will take a bit longer to dedicate also the land to the different enterprises. And finally, in fact, the economic level, the economic part of our report, the economic impact of our report reflects the very early stages of these groups. £45,000 was the overall additional income produced, so not very much, as you can think. But within the 2 years, there were part-time employment opportunities provided, at least by 2 groups. And also an enormous amount of upskilling, learning, and educational opportunities by 7 of the groups. And there were enterprises activity already there. Farm shops, CSA schemes, agritourism, they were already there and developed a bit more. So as you can see, in 2 years of support and networking and working together, we were able to measure some of the impacts on those elements of community farm: land, people, and also the enterprise aspects. I wanted to now let you see a very, very quick video of the people involved. So if you recognize the people here, do go and talk to them. But let's see.
Community farming is a sustainable lifestyle of shared community. As a private farmer and landowner in Scotland, engaged in the community, the farm become part of the community instead of part.
For us, the Big House has been first and foremost reasons for people to come together. It's given us an opportunity to bring the local community and Aoibeann to express their interest in farming.
Community farming to me is hope for people, the planet, and the way of doing business.
The space where people can gather to do things.
It's the most joyful way I know to grow food. It's about connecting people with the seasons, the land, and the food that they eat.
Connecting communities, healing the land,
Growing nutritious food in their ways.
As a working farm, there's great to welcome people to work alongside.
And for me, it's about building community and allowing people to experience farming.
I think for me, community farming is all about bringing different people to the farm and giving them opportunities to engage with the whole process of farming.
So community farming is a process of collaborative transformation. There are intersections between, sorry, let me stop here. How can I stop?
Community farming is a sustainable lifestyle of shared community.
Sorry.
As a
Very good. Sorry about that. Community farming then was defined by these 9 groups involved in the project as the intersection between those elements, the land, the enterprise, and the community. But as you have seen, most of the groups developed their communities. So sometimes we have this idea of communities that they are already there. But all the community farms that we worked with, they developed those communities in the making of their community farm. So communities become part of community farming. And this is something that we struggle at the beginning because we always say, so where are the communities? Why they don't come to us? You know, where are the people that we wanted to involve? Well, it's actually you are building a community in your community farm. You are creating that space and that place where communities actually started to find a place, a home, like Matt said. But let us go back to the number. The numbers are very, very important because for only £100,000 investment, we got a social return of 3.56 total value of the social invested. So it means that for each pound that we invested, we got back £3.5 in social value. And that comes out of the measurement that this report, and by the way, this report is available to all of you, has made. So very much you can actually see. So for each pound, we got back 3.52. And the most value that we got back was from the social aspect, the community involved, the educational aspect. But that really shouldn't really stop you thinking that the other elements of this impact could actually be developed in the future. It's just because we were dealing with a very early stage groups. In fact, we would love to continue this report with the second stage report and actually look at what the social impact would be after 5 years with the same groups, for instance. That's an open call for any of you researcher. Let me finish and I'll come back to you. So the critical success factors for us in this kind of 2 years project were, land access. Land was an important part of the project because they are community farms. And in fact, when we opened up our accelerator program, we invited application both from the farmers, so for people that had land, but also from communities that didn't have land but wanted access to land. And the critical factor for the success of the groups were very much about the land possession. So if you had the land, you had a critical advantage respect of the groups that didn't have. It's very difficult to find land. I come from a different kind of journey than from the cooperative movement. And sometimes as a cooperative movement, we pushed very much the politician to schemes like community asset transfer. And community asset transfer is a policy driven by the Department for Communities that we really welcome initially because we felt that could have been a very interesting way how public land could be transferred to communities. But we found that policy has taken so long to be implemented, and there are so many challenges. And when we are looking at this project, that it's only 2 years, farmers themselves that had the land were open to more community engagement and more communities' involvement in their own land. You just started to get the feeling that the public policies are getting it wrong, really, because it's easier for us now to go to who owns privately the land and opening up, or like a Jubilee, collectively buying and co-own a land. So there are quite a lot of reflection from our point of view. The other thing is community engagement. That is very much what Matt has said, how important it is to reach out to people that initially volunteer but then becomes really actors within the community farm. And I would say that we have seen the transformation through these 9 groups of initially community of interest, then it became a community of place with the people coming in, and eventually community of practice, because all of them, so there is a dynamic transformation, and all these groups now teach to each other what is the best practice for them. And there is an openness there that we really welcome. The critical factor is also financial sustainability. £100,000 we divided in 1/4 went directly to the groups, 1/4 went to the researcher for the impact report, and the rest was capacity building. Not a lot of money, if you really think about it. But that 1/4 that we give directly to the groups actually helped the groups to dedicate the time to the thinking, the energy to develop. So again, if there is something that we could learn is financial sustainability is a big word. It's also start with the startup capital and buying the time that people wanted to dedicate to develop this new type of enterprises, that they bring really the benefit that you heard from Jubilee and multiply that benefit by the 9 groups now. But I close here now with, if you wanted to know a bit more about this type of research that we've done, that's our report on our website. The website is cooperativealternatives.coop. And if you wanted to talk to us in Cooperative Alternatives, that is my detail, but I will invite you also to talk to the people that actually were the participants of the project. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tiziana. That was very inspiring. And just to highlight and add to what Tiziana said, that definition of community farming that you saw up there on the screen that is currently working its way through the peer review process in a journal article that we're writing, it's not just the first definition of community farming in these islands. As far as we know, it's the first definition of community farming in the whole world. When we think of agricultural innovation in Northern Ireland, of which we have a very proud history, I'm thinking of Massey Ferguson, which is the tractor that I grew up driving with my grandfather many years ago. We tend to think of technical innovation. We think of better feed conversion ratios for livestock or higher crop yields for plants. But it's also about social innovation. And this, as Tiziana has shared, and also building what Matt said, is a really good example of that. And speaking of social innovation, an organisation that does a lot of social innovation is Rural Support. And our next speaker is Dr. Aoibeann Walsh from Rural Support, which is the farmer support charity for Northern Ireland. She's going to be talking about their role in developing social farming and explain what that is. And we'll maybe talk more later about the difference between social and community farming if you're a bit confused. They kind of bleed into each other a little bit. But they also provide mental health and capacity support for farming families. Farming is a dangerous business. It's a lonely business. It's a very difficult business. And so an organisation like that looks after the farmers who grow the food that we eat is incredibly important. And to tell us more about that work, Aoibeann is going to join us now.
Thank you, Jonny. Good morning, everyone, and happy Good Relations Week, if that's a thing that people say. A massive thank you to Jonny for hosting this event and organising us all to be here today. Thank you all for joining us to hear about social and community farming, and definitely afterwards please ask us about the variance between the two, the similarities, the complements that there are between the two concepts. So I am Head of Social Farming and Innovation with Rural Support. I'm also joined by my colleague Nikki down the back, and we have a stand which displays some of the work that we do, so please chat to either of us if you're interested in social farming or beyond that. In my time today, I hope to give an overview of the social farming sector in Northern Ireland and the opportunity to expand delivery for refugees and asylum seekers as a participant group on a regional basis. So there has been some delivery to date, but to try and get it to the scale that we already have with other service user groups. So in terms of introducing to Rural Support, the title says it all in terms of what we encompass. We are the farm support charity for Northern Ireland. So we are that one-stop shop for a range of different services, from the business side to the other side of the charity that I look after, social farming and innovation. Our charity has a regional spread with partnership working in other jurisdictions. The delivery is through our staff team, through business mentors, counselling mentors, group leaders, volunteers, and oversight from a board of trustees. We have over 20 years of delivery covering farm business support, social farming and innovation, resources, engagement and awareness raising on topics for the farming community. And I'll say I joined Rural Support in 2015, and that was a different change, a different stage of the charity at that point, because we would have been known as the business support charity, and at times maybe that crisis support, and you maybe would have only engaged with the charity if you were in difficulties. That has definitely changed in the sense that we engage with farmers in terms of how to be proactive about their business, about their own health and well-being. And the decision was made in that time when I joined the charity in 2015 that we would deliver the social farming support service. So that was the start of our movement into social innovation. So to give a bit of context to that stage of our development, we are funded by DAERA, Department of Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs, to deliver the social farming support service. And at that time, Minister O'Neill, who became obviously First Minister, referred to it as the type of project that helps social inclusion and improves the lives of many. That decision, in terms of us being the farm support charity already, with a working and funding relationship with DAERA, allowed the support service to be established, following on from an EU-funded cross-border Interreg project. Rural support as a house for social farming was very important. You know, it does take a lot of effort in terms of supporting the farms, getting the message out there about social farming. It takes a dedicated funded resource to do that. Working on those two objectives. So the range of work that Nikki and our colleague Elaine do on the ground is very varied, but could be summarised in terms of trying to promote what social farming is, and then supporting our existing farm group and those who want to deliver social farming. I suppose definitions are very important today because we're talking about two similar concepts. So for social farming, it's an innovative use of agriculture to promote therapy, rehabilitation, social inclusion, education and social services in rural areas. So that was nearly our first starting point in 2015. How are we going to describe social farming? And I come from an academic background, that was the more academic side of what it can be, and it's trying to be as broad as it can be. But really in practice, what is it? So it's a service delivered by farmers, providing the opportunity for individuals with support needs to get involved in farming in a supportive way. It happens on productive working family farms, delivering for a portion of their working week. And central to it is sort of three key elements: the farmer, the participant and the farm. The participant being the individual who engages who's availing of a social farming service. And we decided to go with that term as well at the start of the journey of social farming as an inclusive term, in terms of not being a service user, not being a person in need of support. You're participating in the service. When you're on the farm, you're William Martin or you're John or you're, the person that you are, but in terms of that term. All activities are meaningful, structured and seasonal, and the farmer to participant ratio is 1:3. So it's very much that small group engagement. Some of our farms work 2 members of the farm family and they can support up to 6 people, but we never go beyond 6 people because in terms of getting involved in activities and being part of a small group dynamic. Our experience to date has been focused on 2 participant groups, so learning disability and individuals recovering from mental ill health. That was almost a follow-on from the research project that started social farming in a structured way, north and south. So over that 3-year period, I was a researcher based here at Queen's. We established the contacts, the networks in those 2 service user groups. So of course then, when the department funded rural support and similar support happened in Southern Ireland, they were the groups that we went back to and engaged with, and that is our core delivery. But we want to expand from that, and that'll be the second half of my presentation. We do have limited experience with other groups, including brain injury support, early onset dementia, and social prescribing support needs. Participants are supported in the farm environment to learn, to connect, and to achieve their potential. Social farming is based on service delivery meeting needs and upholding the dignity and rights of all. The farmers involved are committed to using their farm and their skills to improve lives. They are remarkable people delivering a remarkable service under the cover of their normal farming lives. Central also are the core values it's based on, being person-centred, progressive, aiming to achieve positive and life-enhancing outcomes for participants, with a strong focus on opportunities for natural connections and meeting personal choices, providing accessible and real opportunities for social inclusion, and with a high quality of support being fundamental. The last point there refers to our social farming standards. There's some booklets at the table at the back. This is our governance system that we work with the farmers to display what they deliver, being high quality, being thought about in the sense of the people that they support. So it's based on 3 pillars: a person-centred service, a place for all, and a safe farm environment. Because as Jonny mentioned, there are risks on farms, so we have to mitigate those risks as best we can. So where is social farming happening currently? And appreciate you probably won't be able to read the list of names. And these are the current farms, and there's others in this room who are moving towards delivery. So it wouldn't reflect all the farms that we work with. But the farms that are delivering currently, there's 19 delivering 30 sessions for 97 participants per week. Some participants getting to engage in more than one session a week. And sometimes those numbers can seem small or seem like we should be beyond that point, and that is our focus and our intention. But when you think of those 97 participants who are waking up with a purpose to go to a farm as opposed to going to a building-based service that they maybe didn't enjoy, or they can enjoy in complement with getting out to the farm, it's a big deal. The map is available on our website, and you can click in and hear about the different types of farms. As I mentioned, where social farming happens is on productive working family farms, but again, that doesn't tell the full story. These farms are rooted in local rural communities, delivering a service for the health and social well-being of individuals in needed support. There's no prescribed type, size, makeup of a farm enterprise that is required for social farming delivery. Rather, it's the commitment of the farmer to utilise the farm for social good. So that generational farming industry that we have, or culture in Northern Ireland, it's to try and look at the asset that they have, and if they have the ability, the time, the commitment to consider social farming. And I did gloss over at the start in terms of the support we provide the farmers. Training, preparing to deliver social farming, it does take a lot of effort. There's a lot in it in terms of safeguarding, first aid training, health and safety inspections on your farm, insurance. There's a lot to consider, and we support the farmers through that. Also, just the few things that I'd mentioned in terms of participant number, maximum being 6. Just stated up there, majority deliver for one session a week. So that piece of it fitting into your farming week. If you're delivering on a Tuesday, it's a very different day from the rest of your week. While your activities are the same, you're not as free to jump in the Jeep and look after if there's an outbreak somewhere else on the farm. You have to have support and structure in place to allow you to do social farming. We do have farms that deliver more than one day a week. We do have sessions that are available for further referrals, so that's a lot of the ongoing work that we support our farmers through, is if they're delivering a session for 1-2 people, could more people benefit from it? Relevant to today's discussion, some of our farms are straight traditional farm business, farm enterprise, solely owned by the farm family. Some have moved into a different business model, such as community interest companies, to widen their delivery, and we do have farms that would engage in other community wellbeing activities. And we have scope for more. As I say, these are the farms that are currently active, and we want to be working with more. So similar to the community farming video, it's trying to give you a sense of what social farming is, and I find the pictures work very well for that. So a social farming session being a dedicated session structured and provided by the farm family with full supervision of participants at all times. The average session length covers 10 a.m. to 3 p.m, but times vary depending on the normal things such as participant engagement, logistics of getting to the farm. The activities that they get to engage in, typically across 4 activity areas: animal care, horticulture, maintenance, baking and crafts. Just to take you through the images there, the middle image is of jobs for September at Yellow Road Social Farm in Hilltown. So I was lucky enough to be out at the farm quite recently, and I mean that sincerely. It is luck when I get to go out to these farms. They're amazing, and it lifts me from the laptop and phone calls and your normal working environment. But the list covering collecting seeds, harvesting fruit and vegetables, working the orchard, sorting out compost, finishing the refurbishment of the potting shed, selling lambs, planting bulbs. Seasonal, meaningful, things that would be happening on the farm anyway, but they're done with the participants and in a much more structured way. So a number of the images also reflect how good relations are implicit in social farming delivery. We would recognise that social farming allows people to connect into communities, that if perhaps you're someone with a learning disability, you live in a rural community, you're bussed into the local town or city to have your service and you're bussed home in the evening. This allows you to stay in your local community or become part of another rural community. So just in terms of the community connections that can be offered, so the participant in the hive is there. Part of their growing at the farm is to provide produce to the local deli, and he is like a celebrity, he's quite local to where I live, so that's a big deal in terms of getting out. The bottom left image of a flower stall, that was a project for one of the farms over the summer, so selling directly to the local community. Some of the images are just the normal, looking after animals, looking after the land. Bottom right is an art project, again, for engaging in a local community event and engaging with the animals, which can be as simple almost as the farm cat. The top right image is a special image just in terms of celebrating difference and culture. One of the participants there is a very skilled pipe player and flutist with his local marching band. And he's coming to a community where the tradition is very different to that, and they have celebrated his skills, his expertise in that. And luckily it's a very musical family, so they enjoy days like that, where it's an open day for the farm. So just to try to move into how we can expand social farming in Northern Ireland to include refugees and asylum seekers. So we would work in collaboration with the equivalent in Ireland, Social Farm in Ireland, who work across the 26 counties of their jurisdiction with a larger scale in terms of obviously geography to work from and resources in terms of staff. So they are ahead of us in terms of working with refugees and asylum seekers and providing that support. So just listed there are the specific benefits that social farming can bring to this participant group. So skills development or utilisation, so as was talked about with William Martin, he was already a farmer, so using those skills that you already have. Healing in the natural environment. Integration in a community that is more real, more grounded, more normal. The farm and family setting being important to that too, to allow you to be connected to people that you wouldn't ordinarily meet. The cultural exchange between participants and farmers, that dual multiple purpose. Meaningful activity and a sense of purpose for people, and tied to that is learning language as you're doing. So not just straight language learning, but learning as you're doing. So there's a range of specific benefits and outcomes for people seeking to rebuild or build their lives in a new country and community. We know there's an opportunity to realise these benefits for more newcomers to our community here in Northern Ireland on more farms. So just to quickly touch on progress to date, want to acknowledge Timothy, who's in the room, just in terms of the support Queen's would have provided to us through a partnership with Jonny, to look at how we could engage farms to consider supporting refugees and asylum seekers. So my colleague Nikki engaged with Denise Wright of the South Belfast Roundtable to provide training to our interested group of farmers on the situation for refugees and asylum seekers here. This was followed by on-farm engagement on Jubilee Farm, which was showcased today as experience in this type of social farming delivery. These sessions were well received from the farmers, increasing understanding and raising interest levels. So just briefly to touch on what's needed, we're not there yet. We have established delivery with learning disability service users and those recovering from mental ill health becoming participants on the farm. Really, it can be summarised by the three words, the three topics at the bottom. So we need the vision to make this happen, we need policy support, and we need funding. We are very well supported by DAERA in the sense of the work they've done with us to date on social farming, which has funded our support service, which has also funded capital grant development on a number of our farms. how can we build from that? How can we move into other departments? We do have support from Department of Health so far. Department of Communities is probably our next step. Department of Education. How do we broaden this? We definitely see good relations as a core purpose of social farming delivery moving forward, and we have opportunities coming up, fingers crossed, through other funding initiatives such as Peace Plus. So just to finish, basically on coming back to who's involved, the actual people, the farmer and the participant. So with the work that we had done with the interested farmer groups, the first half of this year, farmers in County Antrim, father and daughter, talked about wanting to welcome having refugees and asylum seekers on their farm. Great to learn about farming practices from other countries, and our farm is quite close to a hotel where individuals stay, so it would create an opportunity to help connect those people to the local rural community. And I think that was important to say that, because we maybe think the farms aren't accessible, where this experience is that they know people are nearby. And just to take a quote from the experience of a Syrian participant in County Mayo who was engaging on a 10-week programme on a farm there. Trees are like humans, they need to breathe. So we prune them and we let the air blow through, just like with olive trees in Syria. So the similarities that we can offer for people if they've come from that background or want to engage in that background. So our contact details are there and hopefully will be shared around. I did want to just mention that we are running a Social Farming Awareness Week beginning on Monday the 7th of October. So all the details are on our website, or if you email the top email address there, socialfarming@ruralsupport.org.uk. We are featuring Glenside Farm. We're kicking off there on the Monday, and want to showcase what is happening on the farms that are currently active or that want to move into active delivery in social farming. So yeah, that's me, and thank you, and happy to talk to anyone afterwards about what we do.
Thanks, Aoibeann. Thanks very much, Aoibeann. That was very inspiring, both about the work done to date with particular participant groups in Northern Ireland through social farming, but also about the real potential to work with refugees and asylum seekers in particular. I'm going to invite my three speakers up to the front here to take a chair. I've got a mic, and there's a chance now, if you guys want to start coming up, to ask them questions. I'll field the easy ones. The hard ones I'm going to pass straight over to these individuals. But it's a chance, we're going to stop recording now, so it's a chance just to have an open-hearted discussion.